Hi, my name is Ameenah. Meaghan, Matthew, and I did a forensic crash investigation where we aim to reconstruct a two-vehicle collision involving an LA3 Sportback and a Mitsubishi Outliner as per using physics. The primary objective was to compute critical parameters such as two cars' pre-impact speeds, post-collision velocity, and coefficient of kinetic friction. To do this, we collected data using a controlled block friction test in addition to on-screen evidence like skid distances and scuff marks. The investigation analyzed what transpired during and after the collision using momentum conservation and work energy principles. Here is a list of the calculations completed as part of the investigation. The frictional resistance was measured using a dynamometer test. We obtained a static friction coefficient of 0.79 and a kinetic coefficient of 0.71, both of which are consistent with typical values of dry asphalt. This attests to a high degree of traction that promotes tire contact and dependable braking. We then calculated the post-crash velocity of both cars by applying the work energy principle. We found a combined velocity of 6.7 meters per second or around 24.12 kilometers per hour. This calculation established the base data needed to reconstruct each car's movement before impact. Additionally, consider the car's masses. The Mitsubishi have a total mass of about 1,810 kilograms and the Audi with a total mass of 1,364 kilograms. The result offered a solid base of resembling the event and comprehending the forces involved in the collision. Overall, the friction test confirmed the road was dry and grippy, and the post-crash velocity helped analyze the car pre-impact speed.
We continued the examination of both vehicles after the collision and used the previously determined 6.7 meters a second to isolate the X and Y components using trigonometry. The calculations can contain a fair bit of jargon and be maths heavy, so they've been simplified to the key points to improve readability. It was determined that the X component of the vehicle's post-impact was 22 kilometers an hour. The Y component was 10 kilometers an hour, which will be used in the next step. It's important to note at this point that these values are true for both vehicles post-collision as they slide together. From the description of the collision, it is known that the Audi entering Ballarat Road is solely responsible for the Y component of the collision, as the Mitsubishi was heading in a straight line. Using the Y component of 2.7 meters a second from the previous slide, the conservation of momentum allows us to determine how fast the Audi was traveling in the Y direction at the moment of impact. It was determined that 30 degrees was a reasonable angle for the Audi to be facing at the point of collision, as shown in the top-down image attached. With the Y component and the proposed angle, the full motion of the Audi can now be described at the time of collision. Through trigonometry, it's determined that the total velocity of the Audi, shown on the right, was 26 kilometers an hour at the time of collision. The X component of the Audi is also determined at this time, and it's important to note the negative direction indicates that the Audi was moving in the opposite direction to the Mitsubishi as it turned west onto Ballarat Road. This X component is calculated as negative 13 kilometers an hour. Using the calculated values from the Audi, the impact velocity of the Mitsubishi can now be established. Conservation of momentum in the X direction shows that the impact velocity of the Mitsubishi was 49 kilometers an hour. Working backwards from the impact velocity, the pre-brake speed of the Mitsubishi is then calculated. During braking, the kinetic energy of the Mitsubishi is lost as work due to friction. Using the friction coefficient calculated earlier, it's determined how much energy was lost to braking and therefore what speed the Mitsubishi was traveling before the brakes were applied. It's important to note here that the majority of the braking distance does not contain skid marks, indicating that the ABS system is kicked in and that the brakes are operating under the higher statics friction of a moving tyre. The pre-brake velocity of the Mitsubishi was 66 kilometers an hour. The final element calculated was the distance the Audi must have travelled to reach its velocity at the time of impact. 3 meters a second squared was determined to be a reasonable upper bound acceleration for a driver confidently entering an intersection. Simple kinematic formulas tell us that the Audi must have travelled at least 8.6 meters to reach its pre-impact speed of 7.2 meters a second. A more modest acceleration would only increase the distance the Audi travelled further. Now I'll pass you over to Meaghan, who will deliver our conclusion.
The main point of contention between the two accounts is the Audi driver's claim that he was already in the intersection waiting to make a right turn versus the Mitsubishi driver's claim that the Audi had suddenly driven into the intersection. The first factor to consider is the speed of the Audi at time of impact. This speed has been calculated at 26 kilometers per hour. To reach this speed, the Audi would have travelled approximately 8.6 meters. If already waiting in the intersection, after travelling this distance, the driver would have well and truly cleared the impact site. Therefore, we can confidently say the Audi could not have been waiting within the intersection prior to the collision as claimed by the driver. Other factors now need to be considered that pertain to the scenario that the Audi entered the intersection suddenly just prior to the collision. The large sign and tall hedges on the corner create a potential visual obstruction for both cars. These are shown in the pictures. They obstruct the Mitsubishi's view of cars entering the intersection from Hoadley Court, which would contribute to the claim that the Audi appeared suddenly. They impair the Audi's visibility to see cars travelling at an easterly direction towards the intersection, which could lead a driver to falsely believe there's no oncoming traffic. Supporting evidence is provided by the skid marks and the short braking distance. 10 metres is very close to begin braking, and these sporadic marks are consistent with a hard brake and ABS taking over. It is reasonable to believe that this short braking distance was due to a sudden appearance of an obstacle rather than driver distraction. If the Audi was sitting in the intersection as claimed, the Mitsubishi travelling down a long straight road would have had clear visibility far out from the intersection, applying the brakes earlier. The Audi driver's account mentions no evasive action on their part, and there is no tyre marks to suggest hard acceleration or brake. If sitting in the intersection, the Audi would have had a clear view of the oncoming Mitsubishi, and you would expect to see evidence of some sort of evasive manoeuvre. Although not conclusive, it's worth noting. Our findings are that the visual obstructions, short braking distance, and driver behaviour all support the scenario that the Audi appeared suddenly. The calculated pre-brake speed of 66 kilometers per hour does show that the Mitsubishi driver was speeding in a 60 zone. Humans are poor at absolute speed estimation when a car is coming towards them. It is highly unlikely that the Audi driver would have been able to detect this 6 kilometers per hour with the naked eye. This discredits the Audi driver's claim that the Mitsubishi was obviously speeding. This speeding would have resulted in a slightly higher impact speed at time of collision, but it does not appear to be the cause of the collision. Without traffic light schedule timings, CCTV or eyewitnesses, we cannot say categorically if either party ran a red light. However, we can use momentum and work and energy equations, trigonometry, along with evidence from the crash site to determine which scenario is more probable. The Audi's pre-impact speed, along with other evidence, tends to support the claim of the Mitsubishi driver, leading to the conclusion that the Audi driver is at fault.